Hello, hello. Welcome back. Happy Monday, everyone. It is middle of August. School, at least where we're from, school starts very soon.
Wednesday, Marcus goes
Oh
back.
my
It's
gosh.
early. I feel like it's early.
That is early. That's
Yeah.
super early. Carson doesn't start until the 21st.
Yeah.
Um,
Just like a
so
week behind us. And then I don't know. I think with Labor Day and everything that you have like back to back, because it's like they go, and I think there's probably psychology on one side to say, hey, let's slowly reintroduce them back to give them some breaks, right? So it's like a 4 day or 3 day
mhm.
week. But from a parent standpoint, it just makes my schedule a little bit more challenging. So,
Yeah. Well, the problem with us is Carson's going to a summer camp technically that is within a different school district. And
okay.
so they start a week before he
So
does.
it
And so his
ends.
summer camp ends. And then I have a whole week where I don't have anything for him to do. Um, so yeah.
Look at your park and recreation center because we have the same right now. It's 2.5 week break, and he's going to Naperville Yard, which is different from Parks and Recs. But our Parks and Recs does have summer camp that's going through like the very last week of all of them. So I
Yeah,
don't know.
our park district is a little Elgin. So we live in Elgin, which is a very large city.
Mm,
And there are certain parts of Elgin that are not great.
mm,
And so, including downtown Elgin. So we are on the very outskirts of it. We're like almost basically in another town.
mm.
And so, yeah, I would have to, it would probably have to be like St. Charles or something that's on the other side of us. But I'm sure we'll figure it out. My mother-in-law will probably be able to help. My mom can help. It'll really just be 3 days that week because he is with them the other 2 days anyways. So maybe I'll enlist my husband because he's been gone most of the time this past few weeks. So yeah, just little kids. Luckily, it's Carson and not Taylor because Carson can be self-sufficient
Right.
and can go outside and play and, do the things. So, anyways,
All right, if you're dealing with water retention, you're waking up puffy, your ankles or your wrists are really swollen, or you can't get your rings off, and maybe you're even dragging throughout the day, no matter how much water you drink, there's actually a good chance that you're not actually hydrating properly.
exactly, because water alone is not enough. You need electrolytes, you need sodium, potassium, magnesium, because those things actually pull water into your cells. Otherwise, you're basically just flushing it out and wondering why you're still tired, you're still bloated, and you're still sluggish.
But here's the thing, most electrolyte supplements out there aren't helping you in any way because a lot of them contain things like natural flavors, food dyes, and maltodextrin, which can irritate your gut. And these things can also spike your blood sugar when you're trying to heal.
That's why we both started using Buoy. It's super simple, just trace minerals and electrolytes in liquid form. No flavors, no colors, no sugar, no sweeteners, and you squeeze it into whatever you are drinking: water, coffee, tea, smoothies, you name it.
And it's clinically backed by science too. So studies have shown that buoy helps you hydrate better, 64% better in fact, and that's data coming from key blood and urinary markers, not just marketing fluff. And honestly, you can feel the difference. I've had many clients tell me their digestion's improved, they have less headaches, and they're better energy throughout the day.
And Buoy isn't just for people that go to the gym all the time and sweat a bunch. They actually offer a 35% lifetime discount for anyone that's struggling with chronic illnesses. Things like POTS, Hashimoto's, Crohn's disease, chronic migraines, and every autoimmune condition. They're really committed to making better hydration accessible to people who need it most.
I actually throw it in my coffee every morning because it's such an easy upgrade. You don't even taste it, but you're definitely gonna notice if you miss it.
If you're tired of playing hydration roulette and want something that actually supports your body, you've got to try Buoy. It's honestly one of the simplest ways to feel better faster. Speaking of middle of August, we are about 3 weeks out from our event, which is crazy. I am so excited. It is all coming together. All of the speakers we've been talking to, and all of the people that are attending. I spoke to a bunch of people on Instagram that were like, "I'm coming," and just so excited to meet people in person. So if you have not, if heard, where have you been? But if you have not signed up and you're considering September 5th and 6th. It's a Friday and a Saturday. It is the weekend after Labor Day weekend. So we are hosting a live event, and it is called the Unstuck Event Women's Health and Hormone Summit. And it is all things getting unstuck mentally and physically and just kind of how to thrive in midlife. Because a lot of women, I think, struggle in that time. It's a very turbulent time for hormones and for life changes. Like, I was thinking this morning actually, because my husband's out of town. My mother-in-law took both kids last night. It was a Monday night. And so I was alone in my house all afternoon this past morning. And I was like, I'm so lonely. Like, is this what it feels like when your kids are out of the house and there's not chaos anymore? And like, I can't imagine going through that transition. I can't wait for my chaos to be back and my little ones to be back. And I'm sure I will regret saying this tonight when it's mom, 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 mom. I need this. Where's this? I need this. You lost it. I'm like, I didn't lose anything. You lose everything. So I just, in that time of life, there's this like loss of identity almost, and a rebirth that can happen that can be amazing if you know what's going on with your body and if you know the actions that can be taken. And so that's what we're trying to inform on at this summit. The community is going to be amazing. We have amazing goodie bags. What is going into these do I get a goodie bag?
We're going to treat ourselves to some goodies from the goodie bag. No, we have such amazing sponsors that I think the goodie bag value is more than the ticket cost, which is awesome, right? And we're raffling off a couple big things. We've got blood work and reviews we're giving away. We've got the hormone zoomer we're giving away shortly after our event, Becca and I and our spouses. That'll be fun. Although, yeah, it'll be fun. We're just probably going to be roasted the whole time because Nick and Art together in the combination against Liz and Becca is probably just going to be, I don't know. It'll be fun, I think. But anyways, we're going to the Vibrant Longevity Summit down in Austin, which is, I'm excited for it. We've got
I'm so excited.
Some amazing speakers there. And so we do this ourselves, right? Like, we live and breathe getting into community. We were just walking and talking earlier about like, what are our next steps after a few other things are wrapping up for us this fall in terms of creating community? Is it business coaching? We've had so many practitioners ask us for that. Is it case coaching, case studies, and having practitioners bring us case studies to share our expertise with them and how we deal with some of these complex cases. And it's really all centered around community. And big part of that is being in person. It's totally different than when you're behind a Zoom screen. And very, very thankfully, right, we have that technologies because we work with women around the world. But if you can be there in person, please come. And if you can only come on Saturday, if you are somebody who's local, we've had a few people say, hey, like, I can't get off work Friday. I would definitely be able to come Saturday. Message us and let us know. We can probably figure it out with a few extra tickets just for Saturday. Mm-hmm. And then if you've not seen on our social media posts, that's where we've got, the speakers and then also the whole lineup for Friday and Saturday in the schedule. But we're pumped. I'm excited. And so, continuing to honor our community, today's podcast was a request, actually from YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, leave us those comments. If they're nasty, don't worry about it. Just, save it to yourself. No, I'm just kidding. We appreciate all feedback, and we take it to heart. And so somebody asked after the SIBO podcast and deep dive that we did there, if we could touch on H. pylori. And for me, I deal a lot with this, in terms of people who've come in and they've had multiple rounds of antibiotics for H. pylori. Maybe they've addressed it other ways as well, working with practitioners. And so what we want to do today is kind of talk about the H. pylori puzzle, because there's a lot of pieces that go into this. First, we're going to kick it off with the problem with conventional treatment. And what is the conventional treatment? Generally, it's a double antibiotic with a proton pump inhibitor. Okay. So 9 out of 10 times people are put on proton pump inhibitors. It's because they think they have too much stomach acid, but they actually have too little. So I'll give you just a very high level breakdown. Don't forget, in the show notes, you can sign up for a 7-day trial to the FitMom Society community. There's a whole course I did breaking down the gut microbiome, your esophagus, your duodenum, all of these things that really impact this heartburn, GERD, and reflux situation, and why so many people get it wrong. Your doctors, when you go in, they're saying supplement or, treat the symptom. And so they're trying to mask that. And this is so true in pregnancy. Oh my God. I had a couple of times where the heartburn would be so bad. I was like, I'm taking Tums. Like, I remember I was driving home from picking Marcus up from my mother-in-law, and I was like, we're going to get Tums and we're getting ice cream because I can't handle it. It was like so bad. The moment, though, after that I just continued to increase my betaine HCl, it subsided. And so I want to give just a quick explanation as to that mechanism. And again, we're saying this is not, first of all, this is not medical advice, right? So if you are somebody with heartburn, GERD, or reflux, you need to work with a practitioner, or you need to get off medications and proton pump inhibitors and be symptom free for a few weeks before you address low stomach acid. But when we think about the mechanism that happens, I always give this analogy because it's easy, I think, to understand. So if you had a blender and you wanted to make a smoothie and you put in frozen fruits and veggies and your protein powder, but you didn't put any juice, water, coconut water, anything in there, how is that going to go, right? Are you going to get this really delicious smoothie that is going to taste good? It's going to have a good texture. Things are going to be broken down. It's easy to drink. Or is your blender going to burn out and everything is just going to be, chunks and disgusting, right? So that is basically, think about if you don't have that gastric juice, that stomach acid, your stomach's trying to churn and break this food down and doesn't have that juice. So pressure is building up and it puts pressure on that lower esophageal sphincter. And that's what allows stomach acid and the contents of the stomach to back up into the esophagus. So you feel that burn. Proton pump inhibitor, or let's say Tums, right? Pepsid, anything over the counter that's going to suppress this is going to get you symptom free, but it's not going to change what's happening in the stomach. In fact, it's going to make it worse. And there's a lot of research that shows proton pump inhibitors, one of the worst medications out there, super nutrient depleting for people, especially when we think of zinc, magnesium, B vitamins. How does the downstream get impacted in the gut microbiome? We leave an open door for parasites, bacteria, think SIBO, methane, SIBO, candida, mold, other issues within the microbiome. And it all starts, north. And so that's why we want to talk about this today in terms of H. pylori, because this generally resides in your stomach. And we know that. Here's a few crazy stats that I wanted to share, because H. pylori actually is responsible for a lot of deaths. It's like number 3 or 4 when we think about cancers. It's one of the top 3 causes of cancer-related death worldwide. 89% of stomach cancers are linked to H. pylori, right? One recent projection estimated that cohorts born between 2008 and 2017 could develop 15.6 million gastric cancers over their lifetime, with a 76% attributable rate to H. pylori. So H. pylori can be fatal. It's not just heartburn, GERD, acid reflux. We heavily associate this with things like gastritis, slow motility, ulcers, ruptures or perforation of ulcers, and hemorrhage from ulcers carries a serious mortality risk. 8.6 mortality after bleeding and 23.5 following perforation. Peptic ulcer disease in and of itself has about a 1 in 6 lifetime risk amongst asymptomatic individuals harboring H. pylori. So recognize that you actually do not have to have heartburn, GERD, or reflux to have H. pylori. We pick this up a lot on stool testing, where they're coming in thinking they have methane SIBO or, other types of SIBO. They're just chronically constipated. They have a lot of diarrhea. Maybe they have their gallbladder out, right? And they just don't understand why I have all this bloating and everything else that's going on with them. And then we run a stool test and we say, hey, H. pylori, because this is like a big kahuna. I also wanted to just share a couple of their stats, and then we're going to get into this. But when we think about 89% of non-cardiac gastric cancers being attributable to H. pylori, the projections also show over 11 million gastric cancer cases linked to H. pylori for recent birth cohorts. Children, y'all. So we talk a lot about moms. We pass on our gut microbiome. Yesterday, we just did on case study a PANS case, and this kiddo, I think he's 6 or 7. We did a lot of testing for him, but, we talked about the case and then we talked about mom's health, right? So mom had a lot of digestive issues before, during, and after. He was colicky as a baby. We don't know everything that he's on, everything mom tried at that point in time. It's just getting started with us. So again, we're never blaming or we're never shaming. We're never looking back and saying, man, I did this wrong. Because listen, Becca and I have talked many times about our kids. I did things with Marcus I wish I wouldn't have done. Right now, I'm not doing some of those things with Ethan. And seemingly, things are much different in his health. And so if your kids are getting sick all the time, they're very colicky, they're having a lot of constipation or diarrhea, kind of loose stools, test their gut microbiome. Because especially in this case, what we saw for him is that his bifidobacterium, lactis and infantis are very low. Okay, that is a huge part of developing your immune system, developing the microbiome. The first 1,000 years of a child's life are crucial. We picked this up. I've worked with 7-year-olds. I've worked with a 5-year-old. I've cut another one, man, tomorrow. H. pylori, candida, all these things. Just so sad to see it. But I also have worked with his mom. Guess what his mom came in on? 40 milligrams proton pump inhibitor a day. Do you think that H. pylori has probably been part of her picture for a long time and then also now part of his picture? And he's chronically constipated and he's got all this stuff going on. So I say that because we think sometimes a symptom's just a symptom. A symptom in this case could be life or death. It could be setting your child up for chronic illness unknowingly, right? That's not your fault, but like, hey, all this plays a role. Where are the pediatricians speaking about this? I mean, we've got some amazing functional pediatricians,
Yeah.
but it's time that we really wake up and we say, hey, I'm done suppressing my symptoms with pills. I'm going to ask why. I'm going to go against that pediatrician when they're telling me things that don't feel right in my gut, because I know my child better than anybody else. And I know if something is not improving, the answer is not another round of antibiotics. I have seen
Relax or any of the toxic things that are not FDA approved for children. And we know, and we've talked about how damaging chronic antibiotic use for kids is. And the thing with H. pylori is that H. pylori is so kind of understanding how it becomes a problem. H. pylori creates what's called urase, which turns into ammonia. And ammonia neutralizes stomach acid. So that impairs the ability of the acidity in the stomach to protect from the rest of the GI system, right? Liz was talking about how the acidity is needed not only to break food down, but to kill things. Like it's there to kill bacteria and pathogens and viruses and all of these things. And so H. pylori is a gram-negative bacteria. So it has 2 cell walls. And that outer double layer protects the bacteria of the H. pylori and makes it harder for antimicrobials to work, for herbs to affect the organism, and for antibiotics to work, because gram-negative bacteria contain what are called these efflux pumps, okay? So within their cell walls, they have these pumps that can actually disperse antibiotics. So like you're giving the antibiotic and the H. pylori is like, nah, I'm not working. And so it protects the organism and can actually be really hazardous to the individual. And then because people start to become resistant to antibiotics, especially the H. pylori. And the problem is if you are not getting the H. pylori suppresses the stomach acid level within the gut, and now you have bigger problems. Now you are a compromised individual. Small amounts of H. pylori can be beneficial to the body, but what we see in most cases is that it's an immune compromised person. So little kids are immune compromised basically until their immune system develops, mostly by like age 3 or 4. But these little ones are just more susceptible to things. And then adults, people that are chronically stressed, people that have had digestive issues, we talked about the PPIs, we talk about, autoimmune conditions, all of those things make you immunocompromised. And so you are someone that would be more susceptible to the effects of H. pylori and these gram-negative bacteria. And H. pylori needs to be addressed first because of how it affects stomach acid. And the thing is you don't just go in with antibiotics. You don't just go in with herbs to kill off H. pylori. You typically need to support the immune system and the terrain that it's within first. Because a lot of times H. pylori affects reflux. It creates these GERD environments, which then creates more inflammation in the upper GI because you're having acid upstream into the esophagus, which kind of erodes the tissue in the esophagus. And so it's very inflamed, it's very irritated. And so this is why we always talk about like a top-down approach when you approach GI healing, with the exception, I would say, of you need to be pooping. Like that's kind of the bottom. We need to make sure that the drain is open. But outside of that, it is a top-down approach. So we are usually putting in immunoglobulins. We're putting in, glutamine or aloe vera or things that are really soothing and healing, zinc L-carnosine, to help support that upper GI. And then to support, this is why I love Bloaties Pro. It's very well tolerated. You can give smaller doses to little kids and like a smoothie or something, because you're supporting the immune system of the GI system while you're working on stressing it by trying to eradicate these bacteria and these gram-negative bacteria. And with H. pylori, it has to be addressed first. And so a lot of times we're doing these things alongside addressing the H. pylori because, again, what did we just say? Antibiotics are oftentimes not effective, and the reoccurrence rate is extremely high of H. pylori. Same thing with SIBO. Reoccurrence rate is extremely high because, again, it's not the bacteria that is the problem alone. It is the terrain that it is existing within. And so we need to really think at this from a much more complex view, which is the problem that I think a lot of people run into. Like I actually was talking to someone on Instagram the other day and she said, I've done 2 rounds of antibiotics for H. pylori and I still deal with it. She's like, and someone recommended Pylogard. And I was like, Pylogard's a great product. By itself, though, probably not going to do much for you.
No, it is one that I use in cases where the person's really having a reaction to the eradication protocol, or we see it, but it's not an overtly high level, right? But the person's symptomatic. So I might use it in more of like a gentle protocol, or again, with children. And so I think that, going back to what the conventional medicine model misses, it's that they are just attacking with two types of antibiotics and a proton pump inhibitor. Well, my question is always what happens after that, right? The environment that allowed this to proliferate is now even worse because you've suppressed the stomach acid even further. And so what are they doing on the other side? Are they also putting in, certain probiotics to help mitigate the damage to the microbiome outside of resolving the H. pylori? There's only been one case that I've had that I've actually recommended antibiotic treatment for H. pylori. And we saw the virulence factors. We were able to also see what resistant genes she had to different types of antibiotics. So we knew that what we used would work. The other thing that I'll say is even before they start this, they don't break down biofilms. And so a lot of times, and this is not just H. pylori, we talked about this, I think, with SIBO and Candida, whatever. A lot of times people don't put in different types of biofilm disruptors or busters, if you will, or focus on their dental and their, sinus respiratory microbiome that's all draining into the gut and can create a lot of these plaques, essentially, that we call biofilms. Like they're clusters of bacteria that form around like a little fortress so that the antibiotic can't get to it, or the herbal, treatment that you're doing. And so there's a few pieces that are missing even during treatment. But then I also think about the gut liver axis, right? We talked a little bit about, Becca brought this up, and I think it's a great point in terms of the types of, gram-negative bacteria. Well, there's other things like E. coli, salmonella, these lipopolysaccharides. Those are very inflammatory, not just to the gut microbiome, but also to the body in general. And then they get out of the bloodstream, they go to the liver, they create inflammation there. So now we've got sluggish bile flow, right? Now we're not sequestering toxins, removing cholesterol, calming, things down the way that we should. And we're also then maybe more constipated, or we're becoming insulin resistant because the liver's not signaling. So see how all this is connected, and they're not even supporting that. They might just say, hey, take some Miralax. Well, what about supporting the liver in other ways so that it can also help you detoxify? Because to those out there who would like to argue the liver is your greatest detoxifier, you don't need to help it at all. Not necessarily, in a lot of cases. And so I think that the biggest thing is that they aren't putting the biofilm disruptors in place. They're not soothing before attacking, right? Order of importance matters here. And then not supporting gut lining, and then the repair on the other side in terms of continuing gut lining, support, mucosal barrier integrity, and then also thinking about, foods along the way that either feed H. pylori or help kill H. pylori, not thinking about rebuilding up stomach acid levels, supporting pancreas, a variety goes on. And then now we can also look at different emerging research around H. pylori that says this is not just a gastrointestinal issue. This is a gut-brain issue, right? So there's bi-directional mechanisms at play when we think about the blood-brain barrier. Gut's on fire, brain's on fire. Right. And so H. pylori is a really big one that we see a lot of times cause more like neurological issues. And so, again, we think about this disrupting the immune system, but then we also think about the inflammation that can happen, in the brain, and what happens with that. Well, there's a lot of things that can, go wrong. We can start to have focus issues, ADHD issues. Think about, again, going back to the case we talked about earlier, children. When we're seeing a lot of these gut markers, and then we did a neural zoomer on this other little boy, some of those markers there from inflammation in the brain perspective, there's going to be some behavioral stuff going on. And so, again, it's chicken and an egg scenario here, but we could deduce most likely because of what we see and knowing how the microbiome develops in the first 1,000 days of life and what he's missing or been missing, that's going to, play a role here. So we can see this show up in a lot of ways. Anxiety-like behavior. We can see depression. We can see mood disorders, focus issues, mast cell activation, right? So let's talk about this for a moment. Histamine intolerance and mast cell activation. So your body produces histamine, and we need DAO enzymes to break that down. When we can't break it down enough because of maybe genetics or toxicity, we start to get allergy-like symptoms, asthma-like symptoms, flushing, rashing, hiving, skin issues, right? And so it kind of goes systemic throughout the body because these things are in the bloodstream. This is creating a chemical warfare, and it all goes back to leaky gut that's then getting into, the brain as well through the bloodstream. We can see the impact on visceral sensitivity and motility. So patients and animal models showed a lower discomfort threshold for gastric distension, right? So I'm bloated all the time. I feel like it never goes away. Yes, that can be SIBO, but can also think about why SIBO happens in the small intestine, probably issues upstream. Your autonomic nervous system imbalances with vagal and sympathetic tone alterations. These have been observed in infected individuals with H. pylori. We also think about again, the clinical implications as research continues. Many of these mechanisms that they're looking at in some of the research is saying, okay, so if this person has H. pylori, what is happening with the timing of other symptoms they got in terms of neuroimmune recovery, post-eradication too? How long does it take them to really recover and regain that cognitive function? So it's not just damaging the gut microbiome. It's not just throwing off your immune system. It's really going widespread systemic. And I've seen it time and time again, hearing from individuals, I'm so depressed, right? I can't focus. People get really sick from this stuff, and it's part of root cause, but it is not the root cause. So the other thing I wanted to bring up here, and then we can keep going, just kind of like how we would address this functionally. But part of the root cause here is that the person is so stressed out, their nervous system can't get out of this fight, flight, or freeze state. So that depletes stomach acid. Anytime that you're going through a high stress time, I'm always wanting to put stomach acid support in. I did it through my pregnancy, a little bit postpartum. Right now I feel pretty good. My digestion's good. I'm pooping regularly, nice formed stools. All right. I'm not going to have it in all the time. Am I going to have it in when I eat, like sushi and stuff like that? Yeah, because we've been getting it more, and there's, a higher risk there, or like undercooked meat, steaks, medium rare, whatever. But when you're a highly stressed individual, your stomach acid depletes. As you age, your stomach acid depletes when you're on different medications, not just proton pump inhibitors. So we think about birth control. We think about nutritional deficiencies, right? If I'm low in zinc, B vitamins, which a lot of people are because of different genetics, well, then I'm not producing enough stomach acid, and therefore I'm not breaking down my food as well as I should, and therefore I'm becoming nutrient deficient. So this is what I've said for a long time. I think stomach acid is one of the most valuable supports out there, betaine HCl, but you can't do it or take it unless you've been symptom-free 2 weeks, and you're off any acid reducers, proton pump inhibitors, whatever. And as you're going up, you're titrating your dose, you're going low and slow, allowing your body to start to catch up with you. Don't just blast yourself with, and I've seen other practitioners do this, and I disagree with it. Don't just blast yourself with a bunch of betaine HCl. Low and slow, I talk about it in the course. I like hydrozyme, and then I like to move to a higher dose betaine HCl, give your body time to catch up. We want minimal effective dose. We want to retrain your body to produce this. We don't want to cause any discomfort. And then I think also thinking about, with your blood work, what else could you support your body with, naturally producing this? If you don't get your zinc up, alkaline phosphate is a great marker to look at for zinc status. I like to see it between 70 and 90. A lot of people are low. Get Aquazenius zinc. You can get it from Fullscript. You do a zinc taste test. We've got it in our guides somewhere in Notion and stuff. Do that, and then dose to tolerance so that you can retest yourself with zinc. Zinc is a very, very important cofactor for many things in the body. So I think those are just a few things to kind of call out. And then if your doctor tells you that they don't agree with any of this, great. Buy the book, Why Stomach Acid is Good for You. Read it. Listen to those stories that are in there, and you tell me what, side of the house you want to, what side of the fence you want to be on, because I don't want to be the person, the white man, I think they called him. He was so pale, so frail. That's not how I want to end up, right? So think about all the medications that you're taking. If you are on an SSRI, an antidepressant, whatever you might be on birth control wise, look up, and you can go to Integrative Therapeutics. I believe it's like drug interaction, nutrient checker. Put in your email, pretend you're just whatever is on their drop down. There's not verifying it. Put in your medications, and it's going to show you contraindications, and it'll also show you supportive nutrients. So what are you getting depleted from? What would counteract the effectiveness of your medication? And then you can kind of go from there as to, if you're trying to DIY, which I don't recommend, but as to how you would address that, because this is all going to impact your stomach acid levels.
Yeah. So if you are unsure, if you haven't had any testing, the really common signs and symptoms are like abdominal pain is very common. So mild to severe. Bloating and distension, because again, the low stomach acid can drive a lot of poorly digested food, which then leads to, the feeling of bloating, the feeling of discomfort. Reflux is a huge one. Like belching and reflux or burping is very common with H. pylori. Constant bad breath is another one. And then nausea, especially on an empty stomach. So this is something we see a lot of times with people who maybe are trying to fast and they're nauseous all the time when they're fasting. Really common sign of H. pylori because testing for it can be a little bit tough. Sometimes it is missed often. And there are lots of different ways to test for it. So, like stool testing, blood testing, H. pylori breath tests, endoscopies are all different ways that you can test for it. We obviously use the GI map to test for it, but honestly, we go a lot off of symptoms because they can be very, very telling when a test maybe is not. So, like Liz was saying, if you are planning to approach this, make sure that you are approaching it fully and not just singularly with, oh, this, herb, this product says that it eradicates matula tea, right? Says that it's eradicating H. pylori. Like so many other factors that need to be considered if you truly want to address the big problem that will, for most people, become a reoccurrent problem if you do not address it properly.